Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mystical Motherhood podcast. This is Pritamatma, author of Mystical Motherhood, Fertile, and Alchemy of Becoming. These are all available on Amazon and on my website. And today in this podcast, I want to speak about these three books. Most of my podcasts are just people that are telling their story of awakening that then you as a listener will awaken through their story. And I have found over and over again that I get messages that someone hears something and it's exactly what they needed to hear at the exact moment they needed to hear it. And that's when you know that consciousness or spirit is speaking through the person or guiding you to the podcast or finding the book that you need to find. And that's the awakening process. And this is what my work is about. This platform I've created and will continue to create throughout my lifetime is about the guidance through the awakening process and the raising of your frequency. So specifically, you can bring down a high caliber soul and become that holy grail container, able to easily become pregnant, easily create something amazing for this planet, and clear yourself enough that you clear your whole entire genetic line. And that process isn't an easy process. It's a very confusing process when you begin to enter into changing from what your parents taught you, changing from what society's taught you, changing from your thinking into your heart center. And so each of my books provides a different method of getting there. And some of the methods are through parenting, some of the methods are through pregnancy, and some of the methods are through self-awakening. And what all of my books have in common, Mystical Motherhood, Fertile, and Alchemy of Becoming, is they provide you with spiritual technologies that will enhance your frequency, that will change your thought patterns, that will eliminate the belief systems that don't work for you. And the first book, and I don't really go into my books too much on the podcast, I really pretty much focus on telling stories and having people learn in this alternative form, but these books are really powerful. And I forget to even go as deeply into them as I should because they're teaching tools. And everyone can find something at a place you're at. My first two Mystical Motherhood and Fertile, are actually coffee table books. I made them as like a piece of art so you can easily keep them out and easily open them when you have a question. There are some books out there that you have the ability to open at a certain place and it'll provide you an answer. And I do believe that all three of these books are those kind of books because they were channeled. And when I wrote them, I didn't even really understand what I was writing. I had to read it. And so today I'm going to talk about that. And you can find more about this on the Mystical Motherhood podcast. And either in this podcast or the next one following, I will bring on a guest to talk about Alchemy of Becoming in more detail. But I want to start with Mystical Motherhood. I want to describe how this book can really help you. So if you're on the motherhood journey or you know somebody who is, this book is a step-by-step guidance to awakening through Maslow's hierarchy. So in my work, I am both a Western practitioner and I love Western medicine, but I work in fertility and I work at an IVF center and I have worked in labor and delivery and I've worked at major hospitals and I've worked with major midwives. And so all of these things are very important to me, but so is my spiritual side. And I believe on this planet, those two have to merge, your science and spirit. And so a lot of my work really looks at bringing in theories, bringing in science into the work, bringing in practical knowledge so that you can adapt spirituality to your everyday living and make it really, really easy to raise your frequency daily. I'm going to begin this podcast by going deeply into Mystical Motherhood, then Fertile, then Alchemy of Becoming to teach you how you can use each of these books and the differences between them. So Mystical Motherhood, I received while at the top of a mountain at sunrise. I was told by this man who had a vision that he saw me receiving a massive gift, a little bit longer of a story. So I went on this hike with him and I thought the whole time, I was like, what the heck am I doing on this mountain with this guy? And then lo and behold, an entire program came through in about a couple of hours and I saw my future. Everything he said that would happen at the top of this mountain did. And I saw the layout of Mystical Motherhood and how I can really create, a basic program for women based on Maslow's hierarchy. Maslow's hierarchy takes you from your most basic needs to your highest esteem, to a self-actualized human. And according to Maslow, there's 1 in 100 or even less really self-actualized humans. And those are the type of people I talk about on the Mystical Motherhood podcast. And those are the type of humans I want you to try to create. And I want you to become that first. You cannot create really, really amazing families without you changing. It's all about you. You can't change the child. You can't change your husband. You can't change your family. You can only change you. And so my entire work is all about changing the woman. And so as a result of changing the frequency of the woman, she'll change everything around her. Your money will go up. Your career will change. Your creative projects will blow up. You'll get pregnant quick. Things just happen and begin to play, your life becomes more of a destiny play than a fate play. So Mystical Motherhood is a great book to give to women who are just beginning to awaken, who need that step-by-step approach, especially given, maybe they're transferring into motherhood, maybe they're having their second child. And I look at what a child needs and what a woman needs to create within their family system in order to provide safety, self-esteem, love and belonging, and these higher self-actualized needs of appreciation and joy and being in your heart center. And so it's a really, really easy read, and I think it is, but some people don't. But the way I wrote this book was pretty spectacular as I was traveling around to sacred sites around Europe while I was writing it, and I would listen, and then they would provide me the next section. They would provide me an amazing book to put it and include, or a chapter or an idea. And so it really wasn't written by me. It was written by my higher self or something that came through me as I was understanding what to include in this platform to help a bunch of women around the world. So I love this book. It's really beautiful. And I included in Mystical Motherhood about 20 different meditations from the Kundalini heritage. So Mystical Motherhood looks at labor. It takes my knowledge from, being a labor and delivery nurse and working in family practice and working with Ina May Gaskin. It takes all of that information combined with all of my yogic philosophy information. So the Kundalini heritage has a lot of beautiful knowledge about the mother, about the Ma figure, about infinity. And so I combined the two into this really easy to read book that takes you through Maslow's hierarchy, so step by step through the process. When I wrote Fertile, I was in a beautiful church in New York, which I was guided to move into, which I describe in my third book, Alchemy of Becoming, the process of really listening to your higher self. So Fertile, the way I received my book Fertile is I was guided to go to a cave, Mary Magdalene's cave in the south of France. And I was guided to this land in the south of France where supposedly, not even supposedly, it's 100% sure, the layout of the land is mapped into what they believe to be the original genetic profile of humanity. It sounds nutty, but I describe this all in Fertile. So I was in Europe living with my previous husband and my children, and I was going to sacred sites of the Rose Leyline. And so the Rose Leyline is a very feminine ley line across this planet. It goes from the top of Scotland into France, into, I think even maybe parts of Ireland, but not specifically, but England, and then down into Egypt. And these are all really specific sacred sites. And when you go to these sites, you either remember parts of your past that you maybe have left there, in a spiritual realm, in a past life, or you'll pick up the knowledge from the land if you have the power to do so. A lot of people can go travel to a bunch of beautiful sacred sites around the world, and they would not even have the understanding that something magnificent a gift is waiting for them there, because their frequency is so low and their density is so high. And then so they don't have the ability to perceive that something sacred is around them because they're living in a different dimensional field than other people. So while I was traveling and I went to this cave at the south of France, I it was a magical story. I actually arrived in January and everything was closed in France. I don't even know how I found a hotel. It was an absolute miracle. I could barely find anywhere to buy food because it turned out all of France closed that month, specifically in the region I was at. And I needed to see this cave. So I stayed in this chapel by myself where the skull of Mary Magdalene was held. And so I was like in this scary, scary, scary hotel by myself. And I was the only person in the hotel. There's probably 400 rooms. And it was an old place where the monks would pray over Mary Magdalene's, bones. And so I was living there and I was like, this is so haunted. But I was glad to experience it and see that energy. It was a beautiful space in France. I think the area is called L'Orange. I can't remember the name even. And then I had to get to this cave. So supposedly after Jesus died, Mary Magdalene went to this cave in the south of France to hide for 30 years. And I had seen this cave in meditations for years, and I didn't know what I was seeing. And that often happens to us when we begin to meditate and become connected to something much larger than ourselves. We'll see where we're going to be in the future. At least I do. And it's not like intense, it's like a glimpse. And so I saw Mary Magdalene in this cave and she was surrounded by water. And I was like, where is that? So I had to drive in this rental car and no one is up there. There's no signs for this cave. There's nowhere. I found like a sandwich shop where somebody's like, yeah, if you just park there and walk up that mountain, you'll find it. And of course it's closed. So there's no other pilgrim. It's like a pilgrimage and there's no other pilgrims there. So I began to hike up this hill and there was a lot of branches in the way. I had no idea which way I was going. There's no signs and there's not much written online because I don't think they want to create, they maintain the sacredness of it. So I made it. I walked up probably an hour and a half and I made it to this cave and there was nobody there. And it was the cave that I had seen in my meditations. And for sure, it was Mary Magdalene's cave. It was marked. And I think one monk guards it and he lights all the candles during the day. And so it's surrounded by Mary Magdalene's statues and it's inside this hill. And it's actually on my Instagram under Pritamotma. I have a video of the cave. It's stunning. And I got to spend an hour in there alone. And then someone else came, I think. And I put everywhere I go to these sacred sites, which I did many of them, I put my prayer in it. And my prayer is always the same. How do I awaken myself? How do I awaken humanity? Take me to my highest destiny. I've talked about that in a different podcast, creating your prayer. And from your prayer comes your mission. And you're guided by that prayer. So I wrote it down. And then lo and behold, I'm sitting there later having a coffee at the one place that's open in France. And I realized that no one had ever really spoken about epigenetics in the form of applying it to pregnancy. So I was quickly provided a random podcast of right after this cave experience or just around the time of a man named Bruce Lipton who had studied epigenetics. And epigenetics says that your thoughts, emotions, behavior, and environment program your DNA. And I said, holy hell, no one's applied that to pregnancy. I don't know anybody. I'm looking and looking. And then I know from all of my education, which has been, 10, 11 years past college, that I haven't found, I went to college and I have one of my undergraduates in psychology. And there's no theory out there that I know of that shows that consciousness begins at conception. Most of the theories are, Piaget or Erickson, these are the major theorists of our time for child development. They all begin at 0 when the child's born. And I'm thinking that doesn't make any sense because as we know with my first book, Mystical Motherhood, the yogis taught that consciousness begins in the womb. So I thought, Jesus, sorry to swear, but what if every woman knew this? What if we all understood that our thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and environment, not just our food, Women understand, okay, your diet affects your baby. That's so basic. That's so basic. And when I teach in the clinic, so I still work with pregnant women all day long. So I'm constantly teaching this. It's almost like I awaken a switch within them. Every single woman, I teach the same thing very simply in my 20 minutes I get with them. I teach them what's the sounds around you? What are you eating? What are the smells? What are the colors? What do you do during the day? Is it soft? Is it light? What does it feel like? That's what the baby's going to experience in the womb. And that's consciousness. And it's an easy ways to describe it. And there's, it's sort of just like, how do you experience the world around you? And so in my book, Fertile, I finished it while in the church in Brooklyn, but I began to get the ideas for it as I traveled the Rose Leyline in Europe. And it was the most magical experience. I took my children everywhere, and we went from, we were all over the world gathering information about this book. And while I understood what I needed to write, I understood what I needed to apply and have women learn in the world. So then I had to figure out a really easy way to teach that, that's not a yogic way as I had done in Mystical Motherhood, but like really show that, the time before conception of genomic imprinting and the time during pregnancy is critical for consciousness for yourself and for your whole family. And then for all of the lines that come after you, it can change the whole world around you just in this so very sacred time. And so this book can be read by women long before they become pregnant, and it can even be read by women who are never going to have a baby, because it's still you can still apply it to changing your consciousness in general. So as I'm beginning to understand how to describe this in very simple terms, in my opinion, I'm walking in Glastonbury. So there's this beautiful place in England. It's a ley line it's a powerful ley line. I'm not going to go into all the logistics of it, but I will just say Glastonbury is like taking the Mists of Avalon. That there's a book called The Mists of Avalon, and they talk about, you part the energy of this pretend veil moves, and you can see this real land that lives in Avalon. Well, that is real. There is something there that if you have the perception and the power and the ability to see, know, hear, and perceive your environment in a real way, it's all there. So I rented a house on the countryside, and I was working there basically, and I went on a run. And my phone kept turning off. So I listened, and I heard a voice say, just listen. Just pay attention to the land. Don't listen to this music, which is so potent of a reminder. And in that moment, I saw fertility. I saw the land being the exact example of what a woman needs to understand what it's like to be completely awake and to be completely fertile at the same time. And fertile is not just to conceive a child, it's to conceive a project. It's to be prosperous. It's to have growth. It's to be in balance. And so that's when I really began to understand how the elements, fire, water, earth, air, and ether, affect our consciousness and affect our fertility. And I applied it, and I didn't even think of acupuncture at the time. It didn't even cross my mind until like literally years later of, that's what acupuncture is. And that's why people do it for fertility. But what I really looked at in this book is the development of the embryo and the development of how the sacred geometry of the embryo affects each stage of development, and then how each of the sacred geometrical shapes are connected to the elements and the balance of the feminine within her as the embryo is developed. And so I go deeply into each element: fire, water, air, earth, and ether. And I describe the emotional components of each element from the internal world and the external world. Now, this is what Kundalini Yoga does. It balances the elements. This is what the universe is. It's the elements. So once you understand this basic the basics of the elements, you understand your internal self and you understand the external world around you. And it gives you a really basic understanding of awakening. So if your fire's out of balance, what does that look like? What does water feel like out of balance? How does earth benefit you? How does grounding really change your life and change what you're here to create? And how does air create anxiety? How do all of these things affect your consciousness? And what came through was profound. It blew me away. I was like, this is so deep. This is psychology, and this is a theory within itself. So if a woman can, have a basic understanding of what element she's in when she's creating, are the elements balanced? Is her fire out of control? Is her air out of control, making her mind go too fast? Is the water, is her water element too high so that she begins to, she's crying all the time? And once you move through these elements and you balance them within yourself, you gain power over the element. And the element then comes to serve you, and you then serve it. So fertile, I broke that down into the period of the basic period of conception to the birth of the child, of how you can really change your consciousness. Now, if you don't need to read all that, you can use one of the Kundalini meditations, and it's going to balance your element in general. So all of these books are highly connected. Then, after I wrote Fertile, which I traveled all these different spots, which is sort of like I watched that movie, The Da Vinci Code, and I was like, that's what I did. And I didn't even really know what they were doing in that movie, but it's just like that. It's how do you find the Holy Grail? And in this book, Fertile, I break down what the Holy Grail is and what Mary Magdalene was and what this high frequency DNA is. And the story, of how I wrote it, going from France to Scotland to these different places, it's cool, but it doesn't really matter compared to the knowledge that came from the gathering of that energy in those specific sites. So then my life took me out of my entire life, and my consciousness blew up after I finished this Leyline journey, and I was in Egypt. And I left my whole life and I moved to Brooklyn, because I was guided to move there. And I described this story in detail in my third book, Alchemy of Becoming. And in Alchemy of Becoming, it's the most magical story, I think, and I'd like you to actually read the book. This book will change you, and you can apply it to anything in your life. So really what I focused on Alchemy of Becoming is I tied in what I had understood from the elements, and I took it up a level. And I've talked about this in previous podcasts, and I'm going to take some time in the next few podcasts I release to really, really teach this theory. Alchemy of Becoming is so much knowledge combined into one simple book. It really breaks down something called the Emerald Tablet. And the Emerald Tablet is an ancient text from Egypt, and it is the path to awakening. And it's very rare actually for someone to break it down and to really understand what alchemy is, and to have you apply that to your everyday life. And alchemy ties in the knowledge from Fertile, which is all about the elements and how the elements change your life, and how each step of the awakening process is you moving through one of the elements to balance it within your internal body. And as it becomes in balance with your internal body, it then externally shows that in the world. So your life begins to change as you transform your consciousness on a day-to-day basis, and a year-to-year, lifetime change is happening. So in this book, Alchemy of Becoming, I explained that the heart opening of humanity is happening. And we are going to have to change on a massive level over the next, 15 to 20 years in order to move into the age of Aquarius. And there are particular people on this planet that are here to help with that transformation. And as we move into that transformation, we are going to be required to utilize ancient spiritual technologies that helped in other times and other planets, trust me, in other planets too, for their transformation to take place. And so these spiritual technologies I describe, Mystical Motherhood describes Kundalini Yoga. That's an ancient spiritual technology that quickly transforms your consciousness. And so is the Emerald Tablet. And so what really changed on our planet and what really made us go in a direction that we really shouldn't have gone is when we went deeply into our mind. And so what's happening is a war in polarity on our planet. There's a war of polarity occurring that it's affecting our thought streams. And so you can see that in the news presently. You can see it with vaccines are bad, vaccines are good. You can see it with, you can sit with me, you can't sit with me, because if you're vaccinated, you're not vaccinated. You can see it with Biden versus Trump, black versus white, Jewish versus, Jews versus Palestinians. The divide, the separation is a equivocal experience of what happens within your mind when you are in your thought stream. And so if each one of us can individually heal that thought stream, then we can collectively heal this planet. And what I mean by healing the thought stream is that you go into your heart center, where the thoughts of the polarity of negative and positive mind don't exist. The heart is a neutral place, and it's where we're headed to in the future. And in that neutral place, you go into a place of being where it's all done for you. You're in the now moment of just trusting that your life is being led. You're no longer in control, and something switches in your brain where you are then led by something bigger, and it's never logical. And so in Alchemy of Becoming, I take you through the journey of alchemy as the alchemist. And through this journey, what I teach you is how to heal the mind stream using ancient alchemy and using the elements. And so what the mind stream is really just the subconscious thought forms that are taking over your life. And I connect it back to I connect it back to your childhood, to what I call in the book, the original wound. So it's the same thought stream that maybe you continually create, over and over and over again through every scene of your life. And everybody has one and many, and you may heal one and then it will come back again. And it's always surrounding, maybe yours is around food. Maybe it's around your mother. Maybe it's not being loved. Maybe it's being seen for who you are. Maybe it's your insecurities around your weight, your family. It can be whatever the thing is, or your father. So mine was around my father. And you will continue to attract it and become reactive and self-sabotage your life to recreate that thought stream. And the journey of the alchemist is so profound because the alchemist doesn't want to live like that normal human anymore. The alchemist wants to eliminate these these patterns, these familial issues, so that they no longer run their thought streams or anyone else's in their family or around them. And because remember, Mystical Motherhood's work is really not just it's about you changing you, but then as a result of that, you change all the generations going forward, and then you change all the generations going backwards, because you are the Ma, you are the mother figure. So in Alchemy of Becoming, I'm going to open the book up. I take the reader through the steps of the heart opening process. And in order for the heart to be opened, all of the past patterns of grief, of negativity, of anger, of fear, of phobias need to be felt and purely transformed. And that's alchemy. And then once those griefs and those wounds are looked at and they're healed within, then the mind, the story that you called your life narrative, the story that you were living out, that you're maybe the victim, you're maybe fat, you're infertile, you are, like your father's haunting you, your mother's haunting you, that wound, your original wound, will no longer have power over you. And then when it no longer has power over you, you're able to move into the neutrality of the heart. And so what the news is doing right now, though you may be unconscious of it and may your family is unconscious of it, is it's pulling into your deepest original wounds, right? So you can see it on so many levels. And fear is how you get to those wounds. Fear of not being loved, fear of dying, fear of being sick, fear of medicine. A lot of people have a fear of the vaccine, and that creates even the polarity, right? Then there's fear of the government taking over, fear of guns, fear of being black, fear of black people, fear of being Jewish. All this system is doing, this darker matrix, this darkness that's over our planet for the next 7 years, is pushing in on your original wound, turning on your mind stream so that you go into polarity and not allowing you to enter your heart center. And the most powerful, transformative thing you can do for this planet is be in your heart center, which is a form of being, which is a form of being in the now, which is a form of being in love, and it's Christ consciousness. And that's what we're moving into. And so there are people like many who are beginning to move into their heart, but you have to go through the pain of that. And you have to be able to delineate that what is outside of you in the media and what if all your friends and your family and all these different resources are really just triggering your own ego and reaction, so that you can get out of your heart center and stay in your mind stream and have an opinion about something and have a belief about something and have, something just going in one direction, either the negative or the positive. And so being in the heart center is unknown. It is such a bewildering world because everything, it is almost like you can accelerate very fast in that center, but you're not doing it. It's being done for you. And you don't really plan ahead. It's very difficult to plan ahead. It's almost confusing because you don't know what you'll want to be in that moment. It is much more loving. There's less conflict. It's very calm. There's less doing. There's more love. And as a result of that, you're not reactive. You're not self-sabotaging. Nobody really makes you mad. And so it's a really, really, really amazing place to be. But in order to get there, you have to feel what is taking you out of there. You have to heal the narrative that you've been telling yourself your whole life, these negative storylines. So in my book, Alchemy of Becoming, I discuss this path, and each one of you are going to be in a different place as your heart is opening. So I'm going to open up to the page here of where I describe the different phases of alchemy, so that you can begin to see where you are and what stage you are of letting go of your original wound, so that you can change your own consciousness. And as I'm talking, I have to apologize. I manifested a home on water recently, like one of my best creations, and there is a lawnmower, and so I apologize for that. As I read. So calcination, I've talked about this in other podcasts. I'm going to go quickly through them so that you can kind of see where you may be right now. And then it gives you doesn't really matter because you have to go through them anyway. But then you can be like, oh, I'm in this phase. It gives you some understanding. So understanding what phase you are in alchemy, it's like understanding, oh, I'm about to start my period. Like this is just going to be a shitty day, so then you're not like, you don't get so upset about it. You don't, like, if you weren't confused and you didn't know you were going to start your period, and you had those kind of emotions come up, or it gives you some sort of basic understanding of where your consciousness is at. So calcination is the phase that breaks down your attachment to the material world. So this is destruction of delusions, of appearances, of possessions. And this is when the element fire burns away the mental constructs and belief systems that hold you back and box you in. So if everyone's losing their job around you, or, they are... they get a divorce, or their house burns down. It's like it's fire. Whatever, it lights you on fire and pulls up everything you thought was real in your life, like all your ego, everything you present to the world then crashes down. That's fire. And fire is really intense. And depending on how big your ego is, which ego is the projections of your mind. So how many belief systems you have about yourself, how many belief systems you have about the world, how big your story is, your thinking mind that takes you outside of your heart, that's the bigger the burn, the darker you'll get. The darker the energy that will have to move into your life. And I mean by dark, I mean like, when a fire burns and then there's like ash left over and it's really like muddy black or like black, that's calcination. It's icky and it's intense and it's necessary. So then you see, once everything's crashed down in your life, you see dissolution. And dissolution is the phase that reveals the unconscious emotional parts of yourself for release. So this is where we go into the underworld. This is where, the element water comes in, and it's used to dissolve all the heavy feelings of negative thoughts. So it's like you think you're these things, your mind projects you to be, rich, or, like you want to travel the world and you're so cool and you want to let everybody know you're so cool on Instagram. And then the fire comes along and says, oh, hell no. And then dissolution comes in and says, I suck. Like, who am I? Like, what is all this? Like, what am I doing all this for? And so you have to resolve the deepest wounds of your heart. So this may be when you begin to realize that you were abused. This may begin to, where you realize that, your parents were in a meshed relationship with you, or that your whole life was not real, or like what is real love and what isn't. Because a lot of us live in a form of ignorance, not really seeing the reality in front of us. So dissolution takes you into the deepest unconscious parts of your subconscious to release it, right? Then you go into separation, and in this phase, you begin taking an intimate look at your personality. So you decide what parts of yourself that you want to separate from and what part needs further integration. So I've talked about in previous podcasts how important it is to be a fully integrated human being. And if you're not integrated, which most humans are not, then you present a part of yourself to the world, a persona, which I call a persona, that is not real. Basically, let's say on Instagram, you put up these things of like, this is my life. But in reality, you have a lot of lies and you have a lot of secrets and you don't tell the truth. And so this is when you really see like you may be lying about yourself to the world. So if you're lying to the world, you're lying to everybody around you. And you don't have any success. You won't have prosperity. You won't have what I deem as fertility, which is just abundance and love and self-love, if you don't really go through this phase fully. So you need to say, so if there's a bunch of concepts about yourself happening in the phase of separation, you just say like, no, I don't want to have abuse in my life anymore, or I don't want to have drinking in my life anymore, or I don't want to throw up. I don't want to not eat. I don't want to be nasty to my children, whatever the thing is, right? There's a bunch of things we all have. You're going to say, no, I'm going to separate from that. And that may be, I need to separate from really toxic people. I need to separate from my mom and dad. I need to separate from a spiritual group. I need to let something go. It's the letting go process. And from that, the element air comes in. And air helps you to process things by making changes in your physical, emotional, and mental realms. The element helps to quickly release the old ways of being. So you will consciously review all of the unconscious you went over in dissolution. So you'll look at like all the wounds that you had growing up, like, oh, I was so abused. Oh, my story is so shitty. To swear I need to right now, sorry, but I had such a horrible life. And then it's like, I'm gonna let that go. I'm gonna move in to something bigger, and I'm going to release these blockages, these phobias, and all my neurotic ways, and I'm gonna really get out of my mind stream. And this is when you begin to move into your heart center, just barely. Now, it's very difficult to get past the stage of separation. The first 3 stages, calcination, dissolution, and separation, are always happening to humans. Most humans don't have the frequency, the ability, the consciousness to move past these stages into these higher forms of transformation, of consciousness, of change. They don't want to change. And if you're trying to change your consciousness right now, and you're trying to change somebody else, that's one really, really great coping mechanism of not changing, is trying to change the other person. I'm going to tell you right now, you can't. and that's your projection that you're better than them, or that, they need to change so you can change. That's bull. You need to change yourself, and you need to separate the parts of yourself that can be good to, and the parts of yourself you want to keep. So the good and the bad. And that's basically looking at the polarity within yourself and how you create your own polarity. So trying to change somebody else and through the separation phase is not okay. Just go back to yourself always, to that self-love. So then if you make it past separation and you want to become a very advanced human being that moves into their heart center, you're going to go into the conjunction stage. And this is really when you feel the pain of the heart, and you begin to really enter the heart center, where you begin to feel joy again, where you begin to feel yourself again, you begin to feel alive, but then you go back into the mind. And this is when you may become a bit bipolar. And I don't mean like diagnostically, I mean in your way of being. You go from the mind thought stream of like thinking, which just brings you misery, to your heart center, which is just in joy and in love and in happy where it is. So this is the phase where you merge the conscious and the unconscious parts of yourself for deeper healing. The element earth begins to build a new reality within your consciousness and creates a different way for you to perceive the world around you. And you become more stable and more balanced. And so the heart begins to open and your intuition begins to grow as you become connected to spirit. So conjunction is when the earth element comes in and really grounds you into this new reality of moving up into the higher realms. So this is how all the elements work through changing your consciousness and changing, your alchemy within you. So then you can move into the higher phases of alchemy, which is moving into the unknown, moving up into the realms. So in alchemy, we say as above, so below. Most people just repeat those words and they don't know what the heck they're talking about. But what that means is that you can live in the physical realm as a spiritual being, and you can go up and down in consciousness, meaning that you can dissolve and your astral body can fly up and you can connect to spirit, but you bring it back to earth. And so all of the people out there that can't really take a theory or can't really bring their spirituality back to earth, they haven't grounded within their body. They haven't healed all the elements within their own physical life. Maybe that's holding money. Maybe that's being successful in the earth realm, having friends, having secure family, having all the things I talk about in my first book, Mystical Motherhood, all the basic needs you need. Once those are in place, then you can go up into these higher realms very easily and bring everything back. But all of it's important. So then once you're in conjunction and you begin to get more into your heart, you move into a phase called fermentation and putrefaction. And this is the introduction to your new life. So you begin to have peaks at what, your new life is going to look like, because everything's going to change once you move into your heart center. You're going to get new friends. You may find a new career path. You may, see what your future can bring. But the element ether will begin to arise in your consciousness as you move through these final phases of alchemy. And what that means is that alchemy changes you out of your thinking mind into your heart center. That's what it does. And it heals those original wounds. It heals your past. And so you will get tested to see if the wound is really healed within you. And so you'll have people, situations come back in that will mirror your original wound to you. So it may be that you're an alcoholic and then, you lost your job. So you really had to, stop drinking so you could get your job back. But this is a story, right? And so then you really need to go to rehab, and you begin to find yourself in rehab, and you begin to connect to your heart center, and you're really healed for a while. And then you begin to connect to spirit. So then you get tested. Will you drink alcohol again? Maybe it's in front of you at a bar or whatever. So this could be with dating. And my example in Alchemy of Becoming was dating. After I left my husband, and how my father was recreated consistently. And it really wasn't about any of the men. It was about my own healing process that I was going through to heal my original wound of my father. And so as my mind stream was healing, I would get tested, and I still do, Will I go into that wound again? Will I react to those thought streams? Will I allow that thought stream to take over my balance and well-being as I'm connected to spirit on earth, right? Will I allow the outside world to have any effect on me? And the alchemist says no. The alchemist doesn't allow the news to have an effect on them. The alchemist doesn't allow anything that's spinning in their outside world to internally change their navigation system. And so fermentation and putrefaction is taking you into that, the path of the spiritual warrior. So you begin to see what you're here to do, but you have to purify yourself in your thought forms a little bit more to get there. So then you move into distillation, and so basically distillation is in order for you to know whether you can hold true to your new life, which is your new narrative, your new way of being, your new, as a spiritual warrior, you're here to show love. You're here for your highest destiny. You're here for your family. You're here to create a conscious child. You're here to do it different, right? Can you hold true to that? Or will you self-sabotage? Will you be reactive? Will you go back into that past pattern? And so those subconscious thought forms will appear in real life like ghosts from your past. And you have to pass those tests. And in this book, I teach you how. So then the final phase of alchemy is coagulation. And it's really the phase of the Christ consciousness and the heart center coming out, where everything sort of comes together. And you're maybe tested a little bit, but nothing like you were before. And you've reached a stage where you're now fully conscious and interacting with the world at the level of the heart and with love. And so the people that you're surrounded with will be completely new, and they'll be full of love for you. And it may be that you have a career change. It may be that, something happened. Just your life begins to really change at that point because you've been through the whole stage of alchemy and you're a new person. And in the final stage of coagulation, you provide a gift for the planet because you went to these higher worlds. You've been on the road of the hero's journey. You've been to the lowest of the low. You've been underground into the darkest places. You've been tested. You've seen what is real within you and what is real within the world. What is your truth and what is not. And then you have to bring that knowledge back to teach other people. And then you become that true spiritual warrior that's here to really change the planet. And your gift of alchemy may be your consciousness. It may be the child you birth. It may be the book you create. It may be the love that you have. It may be the food you cook for your family. Because in that new way of being, in the present moment, you're giving a gift to humanity to completely change themselves and everything around you, because that's what alchemy does. It transforms everything around it into gold. And it's such a freaking good book, and I'm proud of it, and I know it will be read by many generations. And all of these books are. And I wanted to just take this hour to kind of discuss how they all go together. And they take you from your most basic level of consciousness, each one of them really, mystical motherhood, fertile, and alchemy becoming, into these higher realms of consciousness so that you can clear your genetic line. If you have any questions for me, I want you to reach out to me, please, at mysticalmotherhood@gmail.com. If you want to work with me privately, you can go to my website, www.mysticalmotherhood, and you can read about the different offerings I provide. There are 3 different courses on my website that focus on all of these different things. One of them takes you step by step through the meditations of Alchemy of Becoming. The one called Healing Generational Patterns focuses exactly on how to, easily heal generational patterns. And the Mystical Motherhood and Fertile is combined into a conscious conception course, which is very popular. So these courses take you through meditations, take you through my favorite things that I've learned as I wrote these books. And they're great, and they're easy, and they're cheap, and they last a long time. And so are these books. So I hope that you read at least one of them. I hope that you gift them to a friend. And I hope that you use this knowledge. And if you have read them, may I ask you to go on Amazon and provide a brief review? I would be so beneficial. And if you need to go reach me again, go to www.mysticalmotherhood.com. The next podcast, I'm going to bring on a guest that will talk about where she is in letting her original wound go and healing her thought stream. I was going to include it in this one, but then I began to just speak and a lot of information came out. So I hope you enjoy, and I'll be back with her soon.